basically one room, one warehouse.
And that was a morgue. I only found that out recently when we were looking at some of those videos about the facts.
I'm after watching it hundreds of times probably at this
and then you look at it and you go, oh yeah, and it's like fucking Mr. Blonde is sitting on a horse.
Yeah, now in fairness, it's covered in a dust sheet, so you don't really cop it.
Pretty cool place. If you're a Martian. Or a vampire. Get yourself a good shark. Get yourself a good shark.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Retro Rejects. No, the Retro Dropouts. Actually, the Retro Rejects sounds a bit better.
I don't know.
Yeah, we'll go with the Retro Rejects. This is episode 1. And it's for people who don't know, it's a podcast covering all things retro as far back as the 1870s, where we
maybe not that far back. We're not that old.
Well, we're 80s kids and 90s teenagers.
Yeah,
I suppose so. It's going to be primarily the 80s and 90s. And we talking movies, games, comics,
music, pop culture,
everything you can think of. Well, there's probably other similar podcasts out there that are far better.
I'm sure there's millions.
Yeah.
But here's just 1,000,001.
Yeah, so if you don't like Irish people, you don't like the 80s and 90s, maybe
not
go
for
over
you.
there. Yeah. But anyway, this week's episode is Reservoir Dogs. Originally we were going to do a podcast about soundtracks. We're going to focus on the Reservoir Dogs soundtrack, which is a very 70s inspired soundtrack, kind of fitting in with the retro kind of theme of the whole podcast. Tarantino picked because he thought it'd kind of like have that nostalgic feel. And some of the songs, he was going for different songs, and he heard some of the songs saying like the original song was actually going, well, instead of Little Green Bag.
Yeah, the opening scene was going to be Pink Floyd, Money.
Yeah.
Which, it would have been fairly cool as well, but
I think Pink Floyd actually agreed that they could use it, but they couldn't afford.
Yeah, and Tarantino was listening to the radio at one stage, and this came on, and just a wave of nostalgia kind of thing. They said, Jesus, this might be more fitting actually, and it's kind of upbeat and all the rest. So iconic opening scene.
Well, it's a weird thing about it because, like, it's say with the whole film, which we'll be getting into as we're going on with it, where there's this whole nostalgic. Well, there's a whole nostalgic quality. I think most of Tarantino's films,
and
particularly
even directly rip-off, or not even rip-off, but direct homage with the 70s exploitation films as well.
Yeah, but that's that kind of thing there in Reservoir Dogs, where there's that feeling where it's
gangster type.
Yeah, but it causes that. Like he said that the film was more inspired by. It was an old Stanley Kubrick film from the 50s. Which I can't remember what it's called. But that more so than like City of Fire, a lot of people say that he directly ripped off with a lot of it. And
that's the thing, if you
pretty much
do it shot for shot, I suppose, but again, the point I suppose to be made is like it's about 10 minutes of action in that City of Fire. It's part of a much larger story, whereas Tarantino decided to hone in on the aftermath of a heist gone wrong, essentially.
Yeah, basically it is. It's not as if it's kind of like the newest ideas. I think the whole thing that set it apart was the execution.
Yeah, and the dialogue, I think, as well.
Yeah, like, I mean, it was, when looking back on it, like Tarantino, he changed movie making for a long, long, long time.
Yeah.
And then I think people went away from because there were so many kind of rip-offs.
That's it, there's so many people who are doing Tarantino style, and people are like, oh my God, enough already. But, the original, and I suppose the best.
Yeah, but as well, I suppose the whole thing is that kind of like non-linear storytelling as well. Very Japanese. Like people who are into anime or manga, it's very common. There was an awful lot. I can't think of any off the fucking top of my head now, but I remember seeing it at the time going, oh, that's very similar to some of the anime that I was like watching, where they do that kind of like jumping around. It's a very, and like, I mean, Takeshi Miike and a few of those other Japanese film directors, they do that quite a lot, where it's non-linear storytelling. Well, Japanese of it is a lot of time non-linear storytelling. Western kind of cinema has always been just very linear. And I think Tarantino is probably one of the first that I'm aware of anyway to definitely bring it into popularity.
Yeah.
Like, not that there has been flashbacks and shit before in movies, but... Yeah,
but it was a very definitive, I suppose, statement that I'm not telling this story from, okay, right. As everyone probably knows the plot at this point, there's an undercover cop basically infiltrates his way into a gang that are about to pull off a heist. Heist goes badly wrong, they all meet up afterwards and discuss, oh my God, what went wrong, while trying to, clean up bullet wounds and all
But
the
if
rest.
they had to do it in linear progression, there'd be no kind of like who's the cop? There would be no mystery to it.
Absolutely, and it'd be very boring. It'd be just watching him prepare, and watching him infiltrate, and watching it, and you know it's going to go wrong. Whereas it opens with there's a scene around the table and all the sparky dialogue and all the rest. But
That
then
was
it's
another
straight.
thing that kind of like Tarantino brought into a lot. I remember not so much with Reservoir Dogs, but definitely with Pulp Fiction. There's people singing these praises, going, "This guy's the new Shakespeare." He's bringing street vocabulary into kind of like or regular kind of like speak. Into kind of like cinema, where Shakespeare did that with plays a lot of the time, but Shakespeare also had that kind of like heavy dialogue so far. It wasn't necessarily
It's not for exposition.
yeah.
It's more character building, I suppose, world building. And all
Whereas
that.
Tarantino really was the first outside of plays, kind of like brought that kind of theatre, or well, kind of like play theatrical style into the cinema. But like why we were going to actually discuss one of the big things as well, say the soundtrack with Reservoir Dogs. I think we were just talking about the structure of the movie. That's kind of what I was going to talk about a lot when we were going to do the soundtrack thing, where it was like Tarantino, he structures these movies like albums. So what you have to say, typically in that, you'll have the first song be fucking coming in, beating the shit out of you.
Punchy up, yeah.
Or else it'll be kind of calm or whatever. And kind of with this, it was like calm opener, and then kind of like the first shot is Mr. Orange bleeding to death in the back of the car. You don't know so it's a high adrenaline thing. And then kind of like it goes down for a little bit. Then Mr. Blonde comes into it, then it goes up, then it goes, it's that.
It's got that flow.
Those beats to it that albums have, which I think I find it hard to go back thinking about kind of say popular cinema at the time, but I think it was the thing. It was like you had that whole fucking Spielberg thing was coming, blockbuster stuff. People were getting a bit tired of it, like with Jurassic Park, and not that people got tired of Jurassic Park, but it was
all these
that kind of
films.
era.
Yeah.
And you had stuff like the fucking English, maybe the English Patient was out a lot, but it wasn't. There wasn't like any mad fucking shit going on. Horror movies were kind of getting less creative. Like a lot of horror fans, like I'm a big horror fan. Love 80s horror movies and a lot of movies from the 90s as well.
Yeah.
But the 90s definitely saw a bit of a drop in
and then
cinema.
a renaissance later on.
Yeah, and not that it wasn't there was fucking Matrix at the end of the 90s. There was a lot of good stuff in the 90s, an awful lot of good stuff in the 90s. But Tarantino kind of brought these kind of like old kind of things that would have been kind of straight to video fucking kind of like sensibilities to a higher level, and kind of like that brought it into the cinema at a time where people were like, oh, look at that fucking shit. A lot of the stuff that he referenced in it was kind of like films that people had kind of nearly forgotten about, or they were looking down their nose on, like blaxploitation movies and gangster movies were kind of sneered at. They weren't seen as high art, and they didn't really have a place in cinema. Most of the movies that we grew up with on VHS in the 80s, they were like seen as just shit. Straight to video was seen as an insult about things, unless it was kind of like on the cinema.
Yeah, theatrical release.
You weren't a real kind of like, wasn't real filmmaking. But Tarantino brought a lot of those kind of things into it, and like old kung fu movies, like with Kill Bill.
Yeah. Kind of harken back to previous styles and just freshen them up a little bit for our new audience. I suppose you were talking about the kind of the narrative structure as well. Something that, kind of does drive the soundtrack along as well is a nice little thing that everybody and their son is after doing since then. It's Steve Wright is basically a radio DJ, and he kind of drops in every now and again and sort of keys up the next song that's coming along with a little bit of droll, sort of dry sarcasm and a little joke. And it's this whole thing of somebody gets in a car and the radio is on in the car, and that becomes the soundtrack. And it's Grand Theft Auto was like
Is it because you were a film student at one point? Is it diatronic soundtracks and non-diatronic soundtracks? Is that what it's called?
I don't know.
So diatronic, I could be wrong. I'm going to actually...
Diatronic?
Yeah, maybe diatronic isn't the word, but you have soundtracks that
they're used
only
to
the audience can hear.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And then you have music that kind of like the cast...
It emanates from the film itself, yeah.
You're kind of like, say kind of like Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon with Uma Thurman, and when they're dancing to that,
the dance off.
With it. Keep talking, Laura, when I tell you.
Well, I was like, I didn't think you were going to look it up. I was like, right, what are you talking about there? But yeah, I mean, it's a big kind of a key driver of the whole soundtrack as well, that Steve Wright just drops in and it's this real droll, dry voice. And next up, we got the George Baker selection, Little Green Bag. And it just, I don't know, it kind of situates you in the film as well, where it's this whole, as I said, you know, you get into a car and the radio's playing and you get out and sort of the music follows on a little bit, or it suddenly gets shut off. Like, as you said, that the characters are listening to it. And it was just, I thought at the time as well, it was a really cool way to actually make the soundtrack, make the music part of the actual film itself, rather than theatrical score in the background that just sort of swells up with emotion and disappears out when it's an intense scene or whatever, you know.
Well, that's the thing. It's like what I was. It's diegetic,
okay.
diegetic, non-diegetic. DIEGETIC. Now,
I think we need to get literacy classes.
Yeah, we probably do. Kind of like as well. We're a bit fucking kind of.
It's the end of the day.
Yeah, it's the end of the day, and we're a little bit. What's the word for it? Not being up to speed with podcasts.
Not being up to speed in general life, I would say.
Yeah,
a little bit stupid.
But yeah, Lost Boys. I was going to say they did it perfectly as well. That like a lot of the music was actually happening apart from Cry Little Sister and all. Well, maybe it was. Maybe they were carrying a boombox around and they were flying around killing people.
But yeah, there's a reason for the music. Like there's a concert, so you're hearing the concert music. You know, there's somebody playing something on the radio. You're hearing the radio music.
But that's the thing with Reservoir Dogs. I think a lot of it, like I mean, like the most famous scene probably from it, like the year of the torture scene with Stuck in the Middle, with it. And if you listen to the lyrics, kind of like it kind of matches up about I can't get the smile off my face, and this whole thing. You know, there's parts in it where I know we're jumping all over the place with this, but it's where the Mr. White is talking about Mr. Blonde, and he's kind of like he's a psychopath. You can't work with psychopaths. But when you look at it, kind of say Mr. Blonde would be more of a typical sociopath. He thrives in chaos. He likes killing people. He's doing all these things. He's getting joy from the torture and stuff like that. Whereas Mr. White is more of a psychopath, where he's emotionless. He's got some kind of moral compass, but it's fucking skewed. But like, I mean, the only thing that he, like, even when they talk to him, or well, Mr. Pink is talking to him, and he says, "Oh, did you kill anyone?" And he was like, "Just a few cops." And it's like absolutely nothing. It's sinless, and he's all about act like a fucking professional. And he only seems to get angry, you know. But that's the. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, with Steeler's Wheel, with Stuck in the Middle with You, it kind of references that a little, but not about the whole kind of like, you know, psychopath versus sociopath thing, but that Mr. Blonde is a fucking, you know, he's getting a kick out of doing it, and it fits really, really, really well.
It does, and very unexpectedly so, because again, it's such an upbeat song, and it's such a, most people hear it and they're like, oh yeah, happy, sort of like radio friendly and all the rest, and then you've got this guy dancing around waving a bloody switchblade knife or a razor knife about to cut someone's ear off and throwing
that was the thing that wasn't really done so much up to that point as well.
That would have been real sinister music playing, and you're like, oh no, set the mood of this psychopath.
And it's like, because a lot of like sometimes directors kind of have no respect for the audience, or they're like, no, they need to be told that they're going to be afraid scary, now, or this is kind of a bold thing the man with the razor is doing. Like. But yeah, like if you, most of the fucking songs are like that. Like even with, like, I never heard Little Green Bag before that point.
Oh, did you not?
No. Huh. Did you? Well, yes. you say like.
I know. I'm surprised. I thought you might have heard it on the radio at least.
No, I didn't have radio at my house.
Oh, Jesus. You're just living in a bomb shelter, were you? All right.
Well, people in bomb shelters have radios to communicate with them. Yeah, we had a CB. Yeah. Oh, we actually did have a CB.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Talking to truckers, right?
We used to try. It was probably paedophiles.
There's a little boy talking to us on the radio. Yeah. Yes, good buddy. Why don't you come meet us at your truck stop?
Yeah, this is the bandit, all right. It's Burt Reynolds. Meet me outside.
Maybe not.
Yes. But and then kind of just with the whole musical kind of aspect too, the opening scene with Madonna, where they're talking about Madonna's like a virgin, is what that kind of level of conversation wasn't. Like, I mean, yeah, Clerks kind of came out probably a bit afterwards. I don't know if Kevin Smith was. I doubt he was, because Kevin Smith is pretty much his own fucking thing anyway as well. But it seemed to be an era was probably with our, like, I mean, I think Tarantino and Kevin Smith would fit into our generation, of Gen X as well, even though we'd be younger.
The higher age of it, higher age end,
So they kind of, it was those people started coming to age and making movies where they were bringing all these pop culturalisms in, talking about comics and movies, and like straight to video movies and kind of like B movies from the fucking the 70s, whereas Kevin Smith was more the superhero kind of a thing. But yeah, with the like a virgin speech where they were like discussing that whole thing. And of course, I think Tarantino met Madonna at one point and he asked her, was he right? And she was like, fuck no.
Yeah.
But that whole thing, that whole conversation there at the start, it nearly set it up like the Dirty Dozen or something, where it was like, you kind of knew these guys were going to be criminals and stuff. And it was like, oh yeah, they all get along. They're all kind of like, wacky.
Setting the scene that they are actually getting along and having, banter, I suppose, like a normal group would be, normal work night out or something like that.
And I think that's what makes the next scene so shocking when Mr. Orange is bleeding to death in the back of it. And it does that kind of thing that a lot of outlaw fucking kind of westerns used to do, and like what Rob Zombie does so well, I think, definitely with the Devil's Rejects, where you're rooting for the bad guy. You're watching him doing these horrible things, but you kind of root for him.
Yeah, you're like, oh my god, I hope he gets away. Oh, this poor guy is shot.
So now, like, some people will say, I think that people fall into two camps with who's the good guy and who's the bad guy in it. And like, I mean, I remember reading an interview with Michael Madsen, and he was like, fucking kind of like, Mr. Blonde is not the bad guy. He's fucking kind of just doing what he has to do. He's just like, fucking kind of like.
And again, once his backstory starts getting peppered in throughout the thing, you kind of see like he's a stand-up criminal, I suppose, insofar as he did time for, sort of.
He's loyal.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, this is the whole thing with it, where it's like, are the cops the good guys, or like, whereas you will say kind of like a normal person will go, oh well, Mr. Orange is the good guy.
Yeah, he's trying to stop this heist, like. But
like, I mean, it's kind of insinuated, I think, as the movie, when they kind of go with the flashbacks and stuff, that Mr. Orange is kind of getting sucked more and more into, and he obviously sees himself as the good guy, kind of like at the time as well. It's a comic book reference as well. They were thrown in like about fucking Loris Tierney being like the Thing, and there was Flame On, and there was, I think there was like Marvel posters in Mr. Orange's apartment and stuff. So he probably thought of himself as being like this kind of super cop going in at it. But there was another video I saw where they were saying that Mr. Orange is actually the perfect narcissistic personality disorder, where it's like he's so caught up in all this, he thinks of himself as being a hero, but he's just as bad as the rest of them. Like, he kills the woman when they're robbing her car and stuff, and even with your man Nash, he's like fucking the cop that's been tortured in it. He's like, you shut the fuck up, like, when he's saying I'm deformed and I'm all cut up, and he's like, I'm fucking dying here, but he couldn't remember him.
He's his own main character.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he's his main character in his movie. But when it comes down to it, the rest of them kind of stay true to their own morals throughout the whole thing. Whereas he doesn't. He flip-flops. He's a cop, but he's
the
just
rat,
as bad.
he's a snitch. Exactly. And just says whatever he needs to say to try and like convince other people or to get through to another situation. Whereas you said most of them, they're just like, no, there's kind of criminal code as such, like you don't live by it, and But
I think that's like the like a virgin thing that sets it up where you kind of go, these guys are all kind of funny and so and like Mr. Pink to a certain degree. I think you kind of go, when he's going on about the tips, you're kind of like a fucking. There's
Scabby
something.
bastard,
I find it hard now because Steve Buscemi, fucking words no work today. He's kind of at the time. Looking back, I remember not liking him. He was my least favorite character out of the whole thing at the time.
All right.
It was like, God, he's real slimy, and there's something off about him and the way he was talking and stuff. But now look, because like he's who he is now, and he's so likeable, and it's hard to look at it and kind of with the character and kind of go, ugh.
Yeah, that's interesting. I actually always liked him, but of course that probably just harkens to my stinge bag origins, where I was like, I agree with you. Why should we tip on this? It's exceptional service. And I was like, right on, Mr. Pink. Yeah.
And apparently that was like one of Tarantino's. Apparently that was a thing that he was well known for bringing up. That people were like, fucking. So he kind of like put it into, because he was so well known for it, he decided to put it into the movie.
Well, actually, I suppose that's another thing you're talking about, his filmmaking abilities and how he changes things. I mean, like that whole scene, it's basically done around a round table where the camera is continuously panning and trying to actually remember. It's very hard to remember, like setting up a shot saying, okay, what line side are you on and all the rest. If you're this character looking over at this character, which side should they be on? It's a complex moving kind of machine that they have there, and it feels totally naturalistic. You're not sitting there watching going, ooh, this is an exercise in cool filmmaking. You're just sitting there going, part of the conversation.
Yeah, you feel like you're part of it,
you're looking around the table and you're turning to whoever's talking and listening to it and all the rest. And funny enough, actually, you don't notice Chris Penn is one of the actors in it. Obviously enough, he was brother to Sean Penn. Who was married
he
to
doesn't
Madonna.
get involved.
He doesn't actually get involved in that, but you don't actually notice that he's just sitting back, staying quiet. So it's just this real sense of like sort of a kinetic filmmaking.
Well, there's one the way it's because there's a lot of noise going on in it as well. There's background noise which you don't even notice, but as well you've got like
there's people are muttering away off, not in part of the main conversation, and you can kind of it's like it just flows like a normal conversation where you would have people breaking off into their own like mini conversations as well.
But as well with kind of like Joe, you have him doing the kind of like Toby Wong, Toby Jew. But as well, I think this is kind of the thing that sets it up as well, kind of near the kind of say callback to it, where it has him on one side and he has Harvey Keitel's Mr. White in between him and Mr. Orange, kind of like nearly defending him. And then over on the other side, you have Mr. Pink. Now maybe that's like looking into it too much or whatever. But I think this is the great thing about, like, I mean,
you could look into it and find more little.
Yeah, and there's not fucking many movies nowadays that you can do that. Like, can you look at, like, say, fucking the Infinity Wars with the Avengers
and start analysing it? Yeah.
Like Thanos having a fucking conversation about Madonna.
I wouldn't mind seeing that.
But it just doesn't happen. It's like, that's why I really, like, you suggested going back looking at this, and I was like really happy I want to look at the rest of Tarantino's movies again now, or the next one, because all of a sudden when you're so used to looking at not necessarily shit but
pretty straightforward films,
all of a sudden you look back at that and you kind of go, this is what cinema used to be. And this wasn't even considered fucking cinema when it came out by a lot of people.
That was the thing, I suppose. Like, I mean, I've always been pretty interested in cinema, hence going to like film school and all that kind of stuff once I left normal school and kind of graduated, all that kind of stuff. But like when that burst onto the scene, it was banned in Ireland. You couldn't actually see it. So I ended up, the only way I got to see it was there was an art house cinema running in a gallery, and they got special dispensation because it was like artistic.
Seen as art, I remember that. Gareth
that was
Lane,
it, and that's where I first saw it. And after that, I was absolutely totally obsessed with Tarantino. I was just like, oh my god, this is the best thing ever. And I would have been, I don't know, 14 at the time or something like that.
As well, the thing with Tarantino, because Tarantino wasn't like someone who was a filmmaker, he was a fucking video store clerk. That was after. Now, he was after. It wasn't well known at the time. It was only afterwards the other films that he was after writing, like Natural Born Killers and fucking True Romance. And as well, when he wrote Reservoir Dogs, when it was being shipped around, Tony Scott was interested in directing it, who ended up directing True Romance. But it was like he was self-taught. He did a couple of, well, probably more than a couple of classes, but he was doing acting class, and so that's how he met some of these people in Hollywood at the time. But he was known as being an encyclopedic knowledge of all these fucking videos.
I said he was versed in the language of film, like he understood how.
And he talked about that himself, where he's saying, I just know that's what looks good from seeing thousands of movies. That's what a lot of people, you either have an eye for it or you don't have an eye for it. With it, and the more films you're watching, obviously
exactly, you're getting exposed to such a wide variety.
So I think that was like, he was smart enough, I think, like when Reservoir Dogs came out, people wanted to fucking jump on him for the City on Fire thing, and it was like, oh, you copied this and you robbed this and you ripped this movie off. And there was a famous interview with him, which I'm fairly sure it's on YouTube, where he was like, yeah, I did, I steal from every movie I see.
Yeah.
And
that's
he was like,
art.
And it's like, but it's that whole Pablo Picasso thing where it's like, good artists borrow, great artists steal. But like, of course you're going to be influenced by things, and if someone has a good shot, it's like with music. Like, it'd be one thing if you rob a riff and you rob the whole like if you did you'd want to be insane to do Enter Sandman or fucking some kind of, but if you did a variation on Enter Sandman, maybe in the same tempo or some kind of thing on it, what's wrong with that? And people get influenced by stuff like that. You're subconsciously influenced by it.
But like even you see on any of the algorithms, even it's kind of like, if you like this band, you might like this band because they sound a lot like that. Do you know what I mean? And it's because they have similar sound, and one is influenced by the other. And even the ones that there's a kind of a cascading effect. So like, say you have a younger band are influenced by a sort of a band from the 80s who are influenced by a band from the 70s, back the way and all the way back to like start of music and such.
But I think why people might have gotten maybe angry with Tarantino with that kind of stuff at that time was because a lot of the movies he was, say, referencing or paying homage to or kind of like borrowing kind of like, you know, shots from, they're films that most people weren't familiar with, even fucking movie critics weren't familiar with.
They're just not aware of him. Yeah, so I thought he was trying to be sneaky and pull a fast one.
Yeah, so then they were like, oh, this guy's gone around kind of, and as well I think they felt a bit duped that there was this guy doing all these, like, I mean, he was influenced by like fucking new wave French movies probably as much as he was by blaxploitation movies, as you know, he was just influenced by everything. Most people are. When you create something, you're influenced by fucking, unless you're trying to say, oh, you know, I want to be next Iron Maiden, and you just fucking play stuff like Maiden, and then no one fucking cares. Unless they're Iron Maiden fans. Whereas Tarantino took from everything. Yeah. And people that were fans of movies just went, that's fucking good. That's really, 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 really good.
Yes.
Sorry, I was just fixing my slipper.
Your slipper? Oh my God, you sound like such a granddad.
Yes, my glass slipper.
You mean your cowboy boot?
Yes, my cowboy boot that I just used to stomp in the head of a rattlesnake.
Yes, here in sunny Ireland.
And I spat tobacco on it.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Backy.
Gardener.
But where were we with Reservoir Dogs?
But I mean, if you talk about it's a bit of a cowboys and Indians as well, sort of a film, you know, sort of they're you know, one group against another group and shooting each other, and you sort of, you're like, Jesus, who do you actually root for here, kind of a thing? Who's the underdog? Because naturally you should be rooting for the cops, but you kind of end up, no, actually I'm kind of rooting for these guys because they're front and centre. And I suppose that's the thing as well, it is a very big character building thing, and it's something that Tarantino did as well to actually make this sort of very prominent in it, was the actual advertising, the movie posters beforehand. It was like each individual character. So you'd have kind of like Mr. Blonde, and you'd have a line about Mr. Blonde and, you know, what he thinks, Mr. Orange, Mr. White and all the rest. So you got introduced to all the characters individually. And of course now we're used to, like, you know, magazines are coming out and they have like special editions, or they have each member of a band, or they have each like sort of hero from a film on the cover, so you can collect them all. But Tarantino kind of did it with Reservoir Dogs, and kick-started that whole thing.
It was very big for say fucking, I remember a lot of people wearing you probably had a Reservoir Dogs
t-shirt, back in the day. Yeah, of course I did. But I had, you know, I was actually that much of a fan. I went to a film and TV museum over in England in Bradford, and I bought stills from the film and plastered my wall on it. That's
really?
Yep, there you go.
Where are they now?
I don't know. I did actually keep them for a long time, but it was the iconic stills where it was like, you know, Mr. White, Mr. Pink, you know, all of these. So I had black and white stills from the film, which cost me a fortune at the time. I was only a teenager, but it was like very expensive for me.
Well, it's those kind of things as well. Like, I mean, now they're relatively common, kind of like
very hard to get those kind of things, especially in bloody rural Ireland. Like, so when I went there, even though they're probably 20 quid sterling each, and that was like a fortune back then, I was like, I have to have them.
People weren't really doing it up to that point. Well, not that I knew of. Like, you didn't see fucking kind of like stills of, I don't know, the French Connection on people's.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, people didn't go kind of that much into it, but I think this kind of hit the right sort of bone, or hit the right chord or something with people who were into films and who were looking for something like this. He was kind of like the new cool thing, like, you know?
I think it was that thing as well, because it was a story of him. It's the same with, say, like, I'm a big Kevin Smith fan, and I think I didn't know his story when I saw Clerks at all. It was just afterwards, probably reading interviews with him, and I was like, this guy came from fucking, and then it was like, with his money, he bought a comic book store. And it kind of nearly feels like, oh, it's one of us. Like, you knew people that worked in video stores. I used to hang around video stores.
Yeah, I was the same. I used to hang around in video stores till 1 a.m. shooting the shit, like, and that was it. All my friends worked in video stores.
And this was the thing, like, say, in Ireland, there wasn't really, there was like, it was very hard to get comics. I loved comics, and it was fucking really hard. There was 2 places, I think, up in Dublin. Maybe one place over in Galway, but I never went there. And maybe a lot of little shops around, but they wouldn't have been getting like weeklies in or anything like that. Like, I was big into 2000 AD because 2000 AD was relatively easy to get, kind of
being British, I suppose, as well, so it's a lot easier to get that than the American comics.
But they used to do kind of God, what was Panini? I think it might have been Panini, the people that did the stickers. They were doing
Giannini.
Yeah, alright.
Yeah, Panini.
But it was they used to do monthly collection of old Batman stories. So that's how I got into Batman when I was younger. That it was basically stuff that was printed in the fucking 60s and 70s.
Yeah, so
was hitting Ireland in the 90s.
80s, 90s.
Yeah. But yeah, so it was kind of like, for us, it was video stores were much more exciting. And I think that was our way of accessing stories.
Yeah.
And kind of like
culture
accessing
and
kind of,
stuff.
newer kind of stuff. So a lot of people, and as well, people wearing Reservoir Dogs stuff, it was like a way to say, look, I'm a fucking cinephile.
Exactly.
And be careful how you say
I'm a
that.
cinephile, yes. But that's the thing you kind of look at, and you kind of, like most people who are into films, I suppose, they always have their own story that, I'd love to do a film about that myself one day. And then they see Tarantino being able to pull it off, and it's kind of like, maybe I could do that at some stage.
And that's it. It looked so, not simple, but it looked like, it wasn't like fucking Close Encounters of the Third Kind with special effects.
No, the special effects aren't mad. It was basically, if you discount the few outdoor scenes where they're running or they're in a car, all takes place in basically one room, one warehouse.
And that was I only found that out recently when we were looking at some of those videos about the facts.
I'm after watching it hundreds of times probably at this
and then
stage.
you look at it and you go, oh yeah, and it's like fucking Mr. Blonde is sitting on a horse.
Yeah, now in fairness, it's covered in a dust sheet, so you don't really cop it. So I always thought it was just a random car or something like that, but there's like coffins all wrapped up. And
I never noticed the coffins before.
Again, my brain just wrote them off at like filing cabinets or something like that. You just don't think.
I used to always kind of go, what are the chemicals? What is it?
Yeah, why is the bathroom so big or whatever? Why is this kitchen so big? I didn't know what it was, but it was like, the embalming room of it.
Yeah. And that in the embalming room, kind of one of the facts. I'd want it to be one of these shows where it's
did you know?
Did you know? Fucking watch culture and all that have it, and then but it's like there's that thing where they have the white on one side and pink containers on one side, and on the other side it's just one orange container on its own, where it's like it's trying to show the separation between that's so fucking, with Tarantino especially, a lot of people at the time would not have fucking kind of like thought that people were kind of slipping that kind of stuff, and not in a film like that. They would be, it's just because a lot of the big kind of, I suppose at the time, outroar, like Laura was saying, it was banned in Ireland
and England as well too. I think,
was this whole thing that it's a fucking ultra-violent movie.
Glorifying violence.
Yeah. You look at it, there's not that compared to a lot of movies nowadays. There's nothing,
Now, okay, it is at the time, I suppose, when I did see it. Now, of course, bear in mind, I was a young teenager at the time. When you did see. You don't actually see much. You don't see him actually cutting the ear off. All you see is him like holding an ear afterwards. But then it's when the cop turns his head.
I think it's more the slashing and the whole thing that he was going to get set on fire.
Yeah,
I think
it's all this suspenseful, terrifying kind of thing and all the rest. Yeah.
But it's like that, like another film that was banned in Ireland for fucking maybe 20, 30 years, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's hardly any violence. There's no gore in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's no blood.
It's just implied. That's the trouble. Is people see what they have in their own brains, like, it's suggested.
For years, people are like, it's the most violent movie you'll ever see. And it's like, it's not actually, kind of like, it's a lot of it, it's in your fucking head.
It is, yeah. You see in action, you kind of, your brain steps to the next logical step, but it doesn't actually get shown on screen.
And like, even like The Evil Dead got fucking thrown into the video nasty category just because of what it was called, and people were kind of like talking about it. And then it was like, I think they appealed it and it got taken off the video nasty list before like the video nasty list was done away, because people were saying this is actually a work of art, because the director, and kind of like there's not gratuitous, well there is gratuitous violence, but it's not like fucking like Driller Killer.
It's
Driller
like
Killer, there's no violence in it either. But Reservoir Dogs. Another fun fact I didn't realise, Michael Fassbender put together a play of Reservoir Dogs when it was banned when he was a student.
You see, that's the thing, it inspires and stuff like that. People see it and it gets them excited again. They're like, oh my God, here's a slightly new way of doing things that I didn't think of before. And like that, it probably inspires like thousands of like young actors, young filmmakers, young screenplay writers and all the rest to start doing all this like dialogue heavy kind of gangster thing set around, because it certainly did with me. I remember every story I wrote after that, it was like, it was like gangster bus into like, I don't know, a fast food place, and it's always some little gag like that, or it's like, oh my God, he goes to shoot someone but he slips on a milkshake, or but it was just this thing where it sparked off so many people kind of going, oh my God, like there's this is cool again.
I think everyone in our circle of friends talked about making a movie. You actually did go off and do stuff like that, but like, I mean, there was a lot, like I didn't, but I would have been one of these people in pubs like talking, we should do this, we could write this script, like if this person could do. I'm sure a similar effect happened after like Paranormal Activity, definitely after the fucking Blair Witch Project. Everyone was going, I'll do a fucking horror movie out in the woods with a camcorder as well.
Such, found documentary.
But like Tarantino did, and then there was that whole thing. Actually, speaking of that, with the whole thing where it was like, oh, this guy coming from nowhere, and obviously he didn't come from nowhere. It's just that he wasn't like a Coppola, or he wasn't one of these people. So it's a massive thing for someone to go from a video store, and especially for someone to be so fucking amazing.
Yeah, and someone who didn't have huge connections. Now, I think the big connection at the time, I suppose, was Harvey Keitel.
Harvey Keitel, yeah.
coming
The film,
on board.
yeah, they always say, oh, the film wouldn't have got made only for Harvey Keitel, but I think the film wouldn't have got made on the budget that it was.
Or it wouldn't have pulled in the names as well. Like, I mean, Tim Roth apparently didn't even want to, like, what do you call it, audition for it. He was just like, no, I'm not interested at all. And then it was like, Harvey Keitel, because of the stage. Tim Roth was kind of like a well-known kind of, I'm an actor.
Yeah.
And,
But Harvey Keitel was kind of like on the down, kind of like at the time. Well, that was in a video that I was looking at. Whether he fucking was, being honest, I don't.
Yeah, he was at the time, because I remember it myself as well. He was. It's kind of like the thing that Tarantino or Rob Zombie kind of do. They get stars who their star has faded slightly, or the shine has gone off.
But they're still
slightly.
amazing actors.
Exactly, yeah, and they're kind of like, well, I can. This guy doesn't command like $1 million anymore. I can actually afford him now. And then once you put him in the film, it's like, oh my god, why have we stopped watching this guy? He can fucking act, or this girl. Or
That was the thing, when you look at stuff like, say, with the Rob Zombie stuff, Sid Haig. Like, turns out I did see movies with Sid Haig and before, like a lot of movies with Sid Haig,
just
but
weren't
I didn't
aware of him,
really.
yeah.
And then afterwards, it's like, my god, this man, like, but yeah, with Harvey Keitel is amazing. But it's kind of known that, say, Harvey Keitel was playing a psychopath. So there's some lines in it that are a little bit kind of dropped. And there's a bit where he's talking to fucking Joe, and Joe is kind of going, oh, the diamonds will be there at kind of like 12 o'clock. And he comes in kind of like off kilter going, no, they won't. And there's a pause, and they kind of go, ah, ha, 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 ha. And it always seems really awkward. And it's like, fucking, why did they? But you kind of look at it and say, kind of like the way psychopaths are with that kind of, they're trying to kind of like act like people. That is like real acting like a person. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it kind of...
Yeah, kind of enhanced the character as regards that. Yeah.
But we're going on about it being banned.
Yes.
Yeah.
What are you going to say about it being banned?
I don't know. But it was, well, like, I think...
It's not banned now, like, you can get it, like, anywhere in Ireland. But it's, even though, after I'd seen it in the art house cinema, it was still banned for years afterwards.
Oh, yeah, Jesus, it was for a long time. I think there was
I think
a big deal.
it actually, I think it was a new film censor actually came on board eventually and reviewed some of the banned films, and he's kind of like, sure, Jesus, look at the like Hostel was
because Dusk Till Dawn got banned as well. Just because it was Tarantino's name was associated with it, and it was like, what the fuck are you banned that? I remember we could look at it. It was on Channel 4 or Film 4. Was the first
Which
time
in
I actually
English,
saw.
yeah.
Well, it wasn't the first time. I saw it fucking a shitty kind of, because this is like VHS era. So when you get like a copy of it, it was like recorded.
Somebody really,
or
somebody had recorded it on an actual camcorder in a cinema, and then it was like somebody copied it and copied it and copied it.
You can barely
just degenerated.
Like, that's the first time I saw Reservoir Dogs. Was on a VHS like that. And we were looking at it. It's kind of like, you're like fucking, you know, and there was a fuzz kind of with it. And then I think someone had a porno taped afterwards. It was like, all that I can remember is that we were all fucking falling around the place laughing at that. It was like probably a fucking real cheesy American thing. But I remember someone saying like that there was a plane crashing, and someone was like, what we do? And so, let's fuck. and we were like, I mean, I only remember us talking about and laughing about that after, but I don't actually, maybe it might never have been on the fucking thing, and we just made it up and it became real.
Hallucination, group hallucination, yeah.
But
I mean, even like, say, the iconic wardrobes and all the rest, all of them in their suits.
Oh yeah, and they had to wear their own suits.
Yeah, it was all their own clothes because they just didn't have a clothing budget or anything like that. But yet it kind of lent to this. They're wearing the generic kind of cheap black suit and cheap white shirt out of a generic sort of a local sort of a supermarket or something like that. You know, your cheapo kind of, I suppose, the equivalent of pennies or a Duns.
The amount of people that you see after that were dressing in fucking black
the skinny
suits
black ties. Yeah, that's it. I know.
And all of a sudden, walking around, they were like
smoking and wearing sunglasses. Yeah. Oh yeah, you think you're a hotshot criminal, do you? And you're like, yeah, I'm an accountant though, by the way.
Well, funny enough, there was actually someone that we knew that was an accountant that fucking used to.
Really?
And then after Pulp Fiction, he used to fucking, remember Vince Vegas? He had nearly the same one, and he used to wear it around. We were in a small town, and people used to be like, knob, like. But
yeah.
See, if we had this planned out,
Yes, you could have different various topics. Actually, that's something that kind of irks me a bit. It's like if you look at other sort of like, facts about Reservoir Dogs that you never knew. A lot of people seem to bring up like, oh, there's no female character has any dialogue
we were only
in the
saying
film.
that the other night. Yeah.
The only there's a female that pops up and it's like the woman. She's actually, funnily enough, she's pivotal to the whole fucking story. They try and hijack her car and she ends up, she pulls a gun out of her like glove compartment and she ends up shooting Mr. Orange in the gut. So she sparks off this whole slow descent into like everyone arguing about each other and all that, and Mr. Orange slowly dying. She doesn't say anything except scream, but there's a load of people are like, oh, there's no women and they don't have any dialogue. And it's like, it's happening in one room over the space of an hour with a gang of guys who are after doing a heist. Like, do you want to just drop in random women just for the sake of it?
But that's even worse, I think. That's the thing. Like,
it's like not germane to the story at all. It's like it's a gang of like, I can't even remember how many, 6 or 7 or whatever. But it's just like, it's this gang and they're all coming to like the rendezvous point and that's it. Like, why would you shoehorn a woman in?
And as well, kind of like, I hate to be fucking kind of like, it's being realistic about kind of thing, like where they were trying to do a realistic kind of thing. It's like Oz, I think, is with it fucking some of the mad shit that happens in that. I worked in not in a fucking, well, I suppose a similar environment, and that is not off the fucking kind of
it's not too
the
far
wall.
off. Yeah.
It's not fucking very far from kind of like, some of the shit that does happen like on a daily basis. But it's like in Oz, you are not going to have Latino gangs mixing with Aryan gangs,
exactly.
with all this. Like, the whole thing with the Reservoir Dogs, they're all fucking primarily kind of like, Italian mobsters.
Italian American kind of thing. Yeah, so they're obviously going to go for their own kind of community as such, like, because that's who they trust, that's who they do previous criminal acts.
They're normally all fucking related and kind of, that sounds bad, but it is.
It's
all
like a
people
cousin
that they
or
know.
they've done the heist before, so you're not going to have like a United Colours of Benetton kind of like, oh, let's join hands across the
world. Or like
world.
just random women thrown in there, kind
exactly,
of like, especially on the fucking 90s, whereas like it's...
That sounds bad.
Yeah. It does. It all sounds really bad. Like, I don't want people to think that we're like fucking Fox News or something like that.
Yeah, that's what. But it's like it's you can't. I'm of the firm opinion that it actually does more disservice to various groups if you're just shoehorning men just for the sake of it, and you're just like, oh, here's a line just so you say like a woman has spoken in the film, or so we have a minority character or something like that.
Now, I think it might be different if it was set nowadays. With a different kind of gang, because like we've seen plenty of heist movies with like mixtures of men and women and different kind of like backgrounds and stuff.
But it's very specifically a type of kind of like Italian sort of, that whole aspect of it. And, it's the same as like Irish American gangsters. Most of them just work with other Irish.
Yeah, you look at the town and stuff like that. Like, Irish American, well, we're not going to get into but it is, it's just...
Yeah, it was
for
the
the
story.
time. You
it
have
was
to
just
kind
the story, and that's it.
The N-word is used quite like where you kind of...
Yeah, you kind of...
I kind of forgot about it.
Nowadays.
Yeah, and where you're kind of like... And then you kind of go, well... It don't mean that they're all...
But
bad people, like,
they're criminals though at the same point, so of course they're going to have some unsavoury views as well anyway, and of course they're not going to be like, oh, I shan't swear because it's very offensive to other people. They're going to be swearing like fuck, they're going to be using like slurs.
But that's the thing, and it's like, it's not saying that it's okay, kind of like, and think like murdering people isn't
they're
okay either.
Exactly, it's like, you should not be kind of like, oh, I wouldn't be like that psychopath monster that's like also horribly racist or anything like that.
Like, I think it's good. I don't think people should be doing it nowadays. Like, now that people kind of know a bit better,
I suppose, there's better ways of doing things probably. Yeah. But again, I still don't think you should be shoehorning characters in just for the sake of like having it,
Oh no, not in that context. And like, apparently there was scenes cut out of it where there was a female cop.
Yeah, she was helping Tim Roth.
That was a handler, and they cut it out because they were saying it just didn't really.
Yeah, so it kind of takes you out of the story. Exactly, yeah. And
I saw did you ever see the scene with it? And it's like, I think just even the way that they had her dressed was weird. Yeah, it was kind of off. It was kind of. Now, I can't remember the name. But there was a really shitty 80s movie. I think it wasn't China O'Brien. Maybe it was Cherry 2000 or something like that. But it was about a cyborg cop, and that's what she was dressed like. So it didn't. To me, it kind of felt out of place with this kind of 70s throwback aesthetic.
That's it. And then if you look at other Tarantino films, like some of the main characters are women. Do you know what I mean? So you can't say anything about that. Yeah, Uma Thurman, has been in so many of them. And, you have, there's just, so many other strong, and it's not like they're these weakling sort of girlfriends or anything like that. They're fucking kick-ass.
Like Daryl Hannah is probably kind of like, and is it Lucy Liu?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's like, I love Kill Bill. I didn't realise how much I love Kill Bill that when I stopped looking at action movies, I went back and looked at Kill Bill maybe about a year ago. I was like, fucking hell, that movie was amazing. Like, when it came out. And what's looking at Django Unchained as a gang as well, actually, because I don't really remember it. So,
there you go. We'll have to do a whole Tarantino kind of a compilation.
There was one thing I was going to say. When we're talking about kind of like Kevin Smith and all these people, at the time there was like a load of, I think mostly after Pulp Fiction it started happening, where there was all these rip-off movies started coming out. I remember there was like 2 Days in the Valley, which probably, I can't remember it. I can remember it for being like Charlize Theron's kind of like, first film, I think, or maybe second film or something. Like, she was seen as the big star that came out of Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead. Treat Williams, who passed away just a while ago, who I don't know what, he was one of these kind of like, say he wasn't top ranking kind of like actors, like Brad Pitt or anything.
He was a character actor,
But God, I love Treat. If Treat Williams was in something else, this is going to be fucking good. A lot of times it wasn't, but he was brilliant. And there was like I think Andy Garcia was, there was all these kind of like fucking really good character actors. But when you look at it the second time, it's like, must look at it again now years later, you kind of go, not really that, you can see they weren't at the heights of Tarantino. But someone who it's fucking documented about, we were looking at it, was this guy called Troy Duffy. For people who aren't familiar, he did a film called The Boondock Saints. It was like pure, nearly imitation Tarantino. It was this guy, he was a barman. They had a band at the time called The Brood. Him and his brother and all his friends, they moved to LA to try and break into the industry. He ended up giving his script to someone who was one of his friends at an acting class or some kind of fucking class, and they passed it on to their boss, which turned out to be Harvey Weinstein at the time. Like, we won't get into fucking the whole thing with him, but what happened was, saying he was like an overnight success. Now his friends decided to film the whole process of it, and he was fucking just, he's an obnoxious, horrible human being. Now, I've seen an interview with, because like, I mean, alright, a lot of times stuff like that can go to your head, you kind of go, alright, but it was more than that. He was like fucking, he
was always like that. It seems like that's just his personality.
There's bits where he was like ringing up Kenneth Branagh and going like, I fucking, and when he's talking about Keanu Reeves and he's like, I'd never work with that fucking punk, and it's like, you've never even made a movie.
Exactly, I know, yeah. It's like, I maybe ask Keanu if he'd work with you. I don't think so.
Yeah, but he just turned into like, the worst kind of person that you could picture in Hollywood. Even before he did anything or anything was really signed. But he was seen as this like success, and it was going to be in the vein of Tarantino, or is this kind of like working class guy coming up making a violent movie. And basically Harvey Weinstein fucking tanked it. Miramax pulled it out for loads of reasons, but overnight as a documentary capture, it's well worth watching. The people that were making it, they were basically managing the band. I think I might have got confused between them and someone else, and they were told like, during it, you're not getting fucking paid for this, you're fucking everyone just got treated like dirt in it. But it all went to their fucking head. And when they did eventually get signed, the band, first thing they did was, instead of going off fucking trying to write songs, they had no songs written for it. They went off fucking celebrating in Mexico or fucking Las Vegas
on the advance, like,
and it's like, what the fuck are you doing? Most bands, like, I mean, seen bands before, when they do get, they're like, fucking hell, we've got like all these songs we've been fucking practicing for years, let's go in and do this.
Get in the studio now that
they're grateful. And like, it's the same with people first time movie make, but this, and like, I mean, the Boondock Saints, it has a bit of a cult following, but when you do look at it, it's terrible,
kind of rubbish.
It's not good. The acting isn't great in it. It's really
kind of like a Room. You know, the Room, kind of, people are watching it more for like, I'm watching for how bad this is.
No, it's got like a really big fan base, that people that are but it's more of a fantasy kind of thing, where it's like, killing criminals, you know, but it's just, it's done terribly. But if you do want to see kind of like that would be what I'd recommend to people to see, the kind of stuff, if you weren't around at the time, that was like Tarantino imitations and kind of like what can go wrong with it.
Very badly wrong.
Like I think he only ever made like the Boondock Saints Part 2.
Yeah.
Which was even worse fucking years later. Sorry if you can hear, that's our cat kind of like crying out there, arguing with our dog in the background.
They're obviously having their own Reservoir Dogs conversation
so
about
he might be telling us that it's like it's time to fucking wind the neck in and shut the fuck up about
Exactly, yeah. There you go. But yeah, Reservoir Dogs. I mean, like it was, I think it was a kind of a turning point for filmmaking. Quite a big one as well, because before Tarantino, there wasn't so much of all this. After Tarantino, nothing but Tarantino clones. I want to be the next, and it was always, I want to be the next Tarantino. I want to do a film like that. And all these, and I think it was actually a really good thing that happened for cinema making, because it just inspired a lot of people to actually try.
Someone cinema needs people like that to come along. Everybody needs outsiders. Like Tarantino was an outsider out of the industry. It happened in the 70s. With cinema, where Coppola and all these people went off doing their own kind of, what was seen as independent filmmaking at the time, away from the studios. And Tarantino and Kevin Smith and a lot of people that came along. And it was probably kind of led by people in the 80s that were making kind of... And like Roger Corman, I think, would probably... Fucking was a massive thing for a lot of people, where it was like all these B movies and just throwing money at kind of like new directors and stuff. You have a lot of people like in the fucking for a long, long time their start. But like, I mean, all those movies in the 80s that were straight to video led up to that point to give people an opportunity, you know, for kind of like Sam Raimi breakthrough fucking kind of, you know. But you need people like this to come along.
And I think with Tarantino as well, he took on this whole, like, he was the rock star mantle kind of thing. He was like, he got this whole wunderkind kind of reputation, and he had this reputation of being like an absolute motormouth as well. He had no filter, he'd just say whatever the fuck he wanted.
But if you compare him to Troy Duffy, he mustn't have been an asshole, because he managed to get on well with people.
Yeah, you know? Exactly, that's it. Now, whatever people say about Tarantino nowadays or anything like that, but at the time he came out and he was a smart mouth guy who wasn't afraid to say stuff. People knew him so well. He was seen with all sorts of, like, you know, I suppose cool and fashionable actors. He was hanging around the musicians and all the rest, and people were like, oh my god, this guy is just, he's a rock star. I want to be like that too. It was like something to aspire to, same as, you know, your favourite band or something like that. I want to be like them. I want to be up on stage and be
But
famous.
as well, I think what happened was, because particularly with Pulp Fiction, when he got John Travolta in on it, and John Travolta's career was pretty much over.
It was like the Harvey Keitel thing. He was he was not doing well.
And then all of a sudden, his career exploded, and John Travolta was back in, and like, I mean, it was like, this was like regular people, not like, you know, people are big into cinema. And a lot of people, they probably at the time they didn't see Pulp Fiction, but it was just a thing. John Travolta dancing was fucking everywhere.
Yeah, iconic. Suddenly he became cool again.
I remember seeing like, say, This Morning with Richard and Judy or something like that, and they had John Travolta on it, and they were like, oh, show us how to dance, you know.
And there was loads of people doing dance offs, and that dance became a thing as well, you know, the sort of the finger across the eyes and all that kind of stuff.
That was from Batman movie. But like, I mean, Pulp Fiction was so fucking big at the time. I remember we went into the cinema to watch it, and I think we said it to you before, that it was a woman went in with her kids and like young kids, and like the ushers came out and they're saying, we don't really think this is serious, you know, maybe you shouldn't. And she was like,
how dare you,
like, where we're from, it's not necessarily rough, but people will tell you fucking
they give you their opinions fairly quick, I suppose, is the nice way to put it.
Like, the ushers were just told to fuck off, like, you know, and all that by the mother. And then I think it was when I got to the part where it was like Uma Thurman got like the injection into the heart, that she kind of ran out with the kids. They were started crying, and for some reason the kind of like the other shit they didn't mind, like fucking Marvin getting his brains blown out. I know that was later on in the film, but
Tarantino, eh?
Yeah, but yeah, he did. He changed cinema.
Exactly. And the way soundtracks, I think, are put together.
Oh,
as well.
definitely. Soundtracks, I think, were on the outs up to that point. Like, I mean, I love movie soundtracks, absolutely. Particularly ones with various artists. Yeah. But that, the way it was, like, I mean, say you had like stuff like Platoon and I don't know if it came out. It must have came out before it. Good Morning Vietnam with Robin Williams kind of brought a lot. Say for my generation, a lot of songs from the 60s that you wouldn't have been
aware of,
like at all. And bands from the 60s. Whereas it's kind of like Tarantino saying the way it was done with the whole kind of K-Billy sound of the 70s, it made it kind of cool. And I think as well at the same time, the Beastie Boys were kind of getting cool again.
Yeah.
It was coming up towards the time of ill communication and all that, you know, where there was this fascination with the 70s.
Yeah. You always have that though, don't you? It's always like 20 years prior, so like the 90s, you're looking back at the 70s kind of thing and thinking, oh, that's quite cool. Like,
So I think it came along at the right time where it was kind of like that mixture, kind of like skateboard, kind of had punk was kind of coming back again. And all, you know, it all came together and it was like people had the same interests with it. And Tarantino just seemed to represent a lot of those for people.
Exactly. The cool kid. Indeed.
So yeah, I think that's it. I don't know how to sign off.
No, we could waffle on for hours about Reservoir Dogs, but we
Go on then, you do it.
Well, I mean, geez, I soundtracks. I bought the tape. I bought the cassette tape, which will tell you how long ago it was and all the
actually, I
rest.
had it on tape.
Yeah, and I played the absolute shit out of it. And it was kind of like, at the time, I was not into that kind of music at all. So, like, people.
So, didn't the insert for the tape as well have like stills from the movie?
I think so, yeah.
That
Just
was the
small
thing.
little ones, yeah. That's it.
But like, look, thank you very much if you've gotten this far. Listen to us ramble on about stuff. We hope you kind of like the show.
Exactly.
If you do, give us a like somewhere. I don't know. Kind
Into
of like,
the ether, yes.
You're an adult. Maybe we don't need to be telling you kind of like, you know, like and subscribe and stuff.
Telling you to do things.
But just thank you very much for listening. We'll be back next week with something completely different.
And now for something completely different.
The Boondock Saints. Okay, take care. Bye.
Thank you.